When they talk about this spiritual journey, it really is an inward process, which is alone. And it's such a bittersweet thing because it's so beautiful to follow that, and at the same time you are called to leave people behind. I think many of us grow up in these troubled households, and especially people that are seekers of truth. There's a reason why we're seeking, right? When you speak truth, truth has a resonance that you can't deny. Maybe we're off on an amino acid or we're off in B vitamins, and just that alone can affect our connection to spirit. At the end of the day, connection's the medicine. It's connection with ourselves and connection with others. That's the true medicine. Self acceptance is nirvana. We are literally accepting that. And then from that, we fall in love with ourselves.
My guest today is Tracy Hawse, a nurse practitioner with over 20 years experience in Western medicine and has also been practicing alternative medicines for over 15 years. It's so good to see you. It's been a long time. Welcome, Tracy.
Yeah, thanks, AO. Sure. It has been a while since, when was that? COVID days. 2020, 21 in Nevada City there. The magic that Nevada City has, it's always will be in my heart. So yeah, thank you. It's really good to see you.
You met us there at Golden Lotus, what we set up, and we kind of felt like family right away, right? Like, what is that? What is that feeling where you just kind of meet people and you know that they're part of your tribe and you just know they're part of your life? Where does that come from?
I think it's a soul recognition, a feeling. It's not necessarily, it's not what the eyes can see. It's just a feeling within yourself that there's a resonance. It's an inner felt knowing, something there's connection there. And that type of connection um, it doesn't happen all the time, right? There's many people that we don't connect with in that way. So when you feel it, you know it.
Kind of like birds of a feather flock together kind of thing, right? And like, where does it come from? Like, do you believe in like past life stuff or from like a certain kind of soul family or what do you believe in that kind of way when you meet those people?
Yeah, I definitely believe in past lives. And maybe we've met in a different life, or maybe we made agreements before we came into this life saying that, we were going to meet and inspire each other to then move on to the next chapter of our lives. Maybe a soul contract, something like that. I'm unsure what exactly, and I do believe in all of those. So something like that for sure.
I feel the same way. Let's go back to you for a minute though, I'm always interested in people that kind of start out in a profession in the Western world and then over time maybe see some limitation there and start incorporating some of the, so-called alternative medicines or something like that, which are, ancient practices and stuff from nature that have been around much longer than the Western world has even been established. But it's always interesting when people have a really strong foundation in the Western world and then later transition. Like some of my favorite people are like Zach Bush. Shout out to that guy, for example. If you don't know him, check him out. But what was your journey like there, to make that transition and start seeing the importance of these alternatives in your own healing and in your work?
Yeah. First, I do want to go back a little bit to that soul tie and the recognition, because my heart wants to. And I when I connect with people like that, and then we move on our journey, and then I'm connecting again with you. It's just like there's a little bit of a bittersweetness, right? Because it's when they talk about this spiritual journey being this kind of alone journey, um, discovery of yourself. And it really is an inward process, which is alone. And it's such a bittersweet thing because it's so beautiful to follow that, and it's really important, and you know it when you're following it, and at the same time you are called to leave people behind that really are part of your hearts. And that's been interesting because I've met so many people, and I'd love to put them all together and then this be our community. And I just don't feel that that's obviously what we're we're meant to do here. We're meant to kind of disperse to in some ways into, maybe raising the vibration of the planet and doing the work for the greatest good. So, yeah, so my heart feels a little bit, it's like, yeah, it's bittersweet. So, anyways, yeah.
I feel it too, just to touch on that really quick. I have a lot of amazing relationships like with people special like you, and they feel that same way where, they would just love so deep in their heart to find their people and have their community with the people that are like-minded and all that, but they're all in a similar situation to what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, and it's like I know the difference like between lonely and being alone, right? I definitely had to work through that lonely part, and it comes at times. And for the most part, then I know I'm not in alignment, right? If I'm feeling lonely, I'm not in alignment. When I'm feeling alone, just because of the way life has situated me, and I've situated myself, I'm in alignment. I know that I'm supposed to be there and it doesn't feel lonely. But when I'm lonely, it's because I'm disconnected and I'm not sure where life is taking me, and I'm not in alignment with that. I'm kind of resisting the process in some way, where when I'm alone, it's like I'm still feeling full, I'm still feeling me. It's just I'm alone, and that's not a bad thing. So that that balance is so important, and I think that um, is an important part of our spiritual process to go through, is to notice and understand that difference.
That's one of the biggest things I hear from my clients, from my friends, is they're really struggling with that loneliness. It's like a loneliness pandemic, even I've heard the term. What's your advice for them to not struggle so hard in that?
I think it's not one piece of advice. It's definitely a body, mind, spirit. Um, Part of that is making sure that your body's working properly, right? That you have the right nutrients, the nutrient densities. Maybe we're off on an amino acid or we're off in B vitamins. And just that alone can affect our connection to spirit. I was working with a woman about 20 years ago, and she was teaching me how to muscle test, listen to the words of consciousness, and muscle test each one. And it was very intensive because you're literally muscle testing each word. And I wrote books and books on that. The connection when I was working with her, I was on the phone with her, we were in a training session, and I was listening to the words that were coming through, and I was muscle testing, and it was like static coming through. Literally, like I couldn't hear um, spirit coming through at all, or God, I say. And then once she said, well, take these supplements. I took them, and about 20 minutes later, literally, it was like this transistor radio just dialed me in, and I could then again hear the stream of consciousness coming through clearly. And it's not like a sound like you and me. It's a whisper, it's a felt knowing, it's all those things, but it was coming through. So my point is physiologically there is part of that that is absolutely important for our connection with spirit, with God. And then the mind spiritual aspect, for me it's spending time in nature where the energy is very pure. I wouldn't choose to live in a city. Just that's just not me, because I'm very sensitive, and that would overstimulate and it would drown out God for me. So nature is important. um, so that's how I will be able to connect. And then also what I've been doing lately is reading spiritual scripture, and for me right now, it's the Bible. And I remember when I was about 14, there was a lot happening in my life. My mom went into a mental institution. My stepfather was in an alcohol place. My stepmom was in an alcohol place. And she had just had a little baby. My dad's palm of his hand was bigger. She was so small. I didn't have anywhere to live. So I ended up living with my sister up in North Carolina. And I started to dig into the Bible, because the Bible, as I started reading it, I would just know things to do. It was very interesting. It was like I knew, like it developed a discipline in me without me having to do anything. It was just literally reading that word And it doesn't have to be the Bible. It can be the Upanishads. It can be the Tao. It doesn't Tao Te Ching, anything there, but it's that word that fed me so much. And so I've come back to that now again after feeling lonely, and then coming back to that and reading that word, and I'm noticing it now. It's a practice, but I'm noticing that voice coming back louder and clearer, so I'm feeling more aligned in that way.
And God, what does that mean to you, God?
Yeah, so I grew up Catholic, and then I went, and when I lived with my sister, they practiced Southern Baptist. So I practiced Southern Baptist vacation Bible schools, church on Sundays and Wednesdays, all of that stuff. And at that time, I was into the Bible. So that was an interesting space for me to be. And then once I left there and came back to my hometown um, in Florida, I started to go to non denominational churches. I kind of went in and out of it, right? For a while, it was like I would go to church for a little bit, not. And then I deepened my spirituality when I was about 28, maybe 30. I started to go to the Chopra Center and I learned meditation, I learned yoga, Ayurveda, and that really like opened me up. I remember doing a Panchakarma, which was a week long of like Ayurvedic different practices to cleanse the body. And I was also doing meditation twice a day and yoga twice a day. And literally after that first experience, my feet actually felt connected to the earth. And I could like literally, like every movement I made was from God. So God to me, it's been a journey, right? Um, I have not called it God at times. When I was growing up, it was God. And then when I went through this, where I studied Vedic traditions and went into this more New Age spirituality, it seemed like many people were allergic to the word God. So initially, I just didn't say God anymore. It was like, oh, it's the universe, very much universe or love or, Allah, people call it all different things. And so I came back around and I was determined to call that God again because so many people, I feel like, have gone off on this new age spirituality and have lost sight of the real purpose of it, right? And it doesn't have to be God. It's to me, God is just this creation, this presence within everything, everyone that is magnificent. And I call that presence God because that's connects me more to as I was growing up, and I'm not resisting that part of me, right? Because there was a long time where I was resisting that growing up Catholic and all of that stuff. It's a feeling like a heart centered, it's an alignment, it's truth. And when you hear truth, when you speak truth, truth has a resonance that you can't deny.
I so agree that you can just hear truth when it is spoken. So you have an interesting story, once again, starting out in the Western world there from your childhood. I'm interested to know how you even got into nursing in the first place, what drew you into that? And it's probably tied into there as well. Your upbringing, you mentioned, some alcoholism in the family and stuff like that. I'm not sure what that is. If you want to touch on your own upbringing, how you got into nursing, and also then deeper healing work from there.
I originally was thinking I was going to be a math teacher. And before college, I did the aptitude test, and it was engineering is really where it was at for me. And I laugh. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you, God, that I did not. No offense to engineering. It's just that that was where my brain was. I'm very left-brained. So nursing, I kind of fell into it, and it eventually, with the spirituality, opened up my right brain, which was I'm so grateful for because again, if I would have went into that other side, it would have continued to feed that. It would have been very difficult for me to go to the other side. So I'm grateful for that because it was allowing me to develop both sides of my brain a little bit. So yeah, honestly, I think what drew me to nursing, really honest, is 3 12-hour shifts a week, and I had 4 days off a week, and that was why I can't deny that. I wanted balance in my life. I didn't want to work all the time. I wanted to have a life outside of there. And at that time, very much like my physicality was important, working out was important, just other things were important to me. So that's how I fell into nursing. I do have an aunt that is a nurse, and my grandmother was nurse's aide. So there is a lineage there. And then I have a niece that's a nurse also. So there's a little bit of a lineage there too. So I don't think there's no mistakes. I don't think it was a mistake. It was just that if I would have if I would have consciously known what I was doing, I just was kind of following, oh, well, I happened to get into nursing school, so that's what I'm doing. If I would have consciously followed it and understood, I don't know if I would have done it, to be honest.
And then what brought you into the alternative healing modes? Like from your
Mm.
childhood, your experiences, what kind of led you past nursing and into that?
I think many of us grow up in these troubled households, and especially people that are seekers of truth. There's a reason why we're seeking, right? There was some sort of unrest or instability that we recognized growing up, and we knew there was something different. We knew there was something better. We knew there was something more healthy. So that I was looking for all kinds of things. I was very interested in wellness and keeping myself well. I have my a very a side of my mom's family that has a lot of mental illness, comes from a lot of mental illness. And I remember at one point telling my mom, I just don't understand why you can't snap out of it. I don't understand why you can't just go for a walk, go do a workout, go do something. I didn't get it until it happened to me. And I got it. I really started to understand, oh my gosh, wow, you can't just do that. It's not just so easy to do that. It's not about just going out in the sunshine all the time. I mean, yes, that's part of it. But there was so much more that needed to be integrated into me to have that healthy sense of self and a healthy relationship again with God.
I resonate very deeply with that because when you met me in Nevada City there, I was going through my dark night of the soul. So I super understand. I get it myself and how close we all are to, you know, just losing it a little bit, just going
Yeah.
past one, veil or something and everything changes, everything can turn upside down. So I know that for myself and many other people around me that have experienced times like that where it's not, to be taken for granted, a peaceful mind and clarity and sanity even, it's not that far away for many of us.
Well, it's funny. I always joke around. I'm like, if you don't know you're crazy, I don't trust you. If you haven't teetered on that edge, I don't know if I trust you. It's like understanding, and I'm glad that I teetered on that edge, right? It was not comfortable. And I'll tell you, this year has been the hardest year of my life, teetering on that edge and literally hanging on by a thread. Um, Prior to that, I had sat with psychedelics. I've done a lot of different varieties of medicine, psilocybin, ayahuasca, and they all were part of the process and helped. Um, and what I was lacking was a bit of integration with that. I was going to ceremonies. I wasn't really working with anyone, right? So I would go to a ceremony and I'd feel great and I'd be like, cool. And honestly, if I'm very, very honest, in the beginning, it was so ego driven. It was so much like I sat with ayahuasca, and the first weekend I sat with ayahuasca, I met God. Literally, like there's no other way to explain it. It was a feeling, it was a knowing. And then I thought, oh, well, I must be so spiritual. I must be so great because I met God, right? Oh, wow, was that um, a joke while God's laughing at me upstairs? Because it's after I sat again, I was like, okay, then that's where like the stuff came in where like I saw myself. I remember sitting in ceremony one time where I was sweating profusely on all fours, vomiting and hearing this message. This was going to be this was one of the biggest lessons of your life. And literally what I was doing was releasing a lot of codependency. And so it was a big one for me. And I'm still now, that was 2019, probably like 2019. And there's still threads of that, right? I mean, I've done a lot of work since then, but there's still like, I always say it's not the work in the ceremony on the mat, it's the work off the mat. And it can take you years and years to work through that. And in my opinion, I also work with people. I serve ketamine for people and do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, and I love it. And the integration piece is so important to be able to um, understand yourself without like, because if you don't have the integration, you're just going to continue to, the medicine can help, absolutely. You're going to end up at the same place that you were before if you don't do that integration work, with some form of another person being able to reflect and being able to help you, coach you through that process. I can't say that enough. I mean, I've seen, I see people that have sat with ketamine, IV ketamine, and there's many companies out there that are doing it, and there's no integration, there's no nothing. I just spoke with a woman the other day where she went and she did a series and she felt great, but then she came back and she's there again. Then she did another series, and I mean, these are $1,000, $1,500 a pop. Insurance is not covering them, they're paying out of pocket, and then they're right back to where they were. They do get the expansion. So can I say that they're exactly where they were? I'm not so sure exactly that, because the moments have changed and we have shifted, but they're minor. The incremental shifts, they're incremental movements. When you are working with someone alongside of you to help you integrate that experience and help you reflect on what's going on, now it's monumental changes. And we just had one of our therapists shared a story. He and I worked with someone. She came to us and she was just beautiful soul. You could just see right through her, and she was just beautiful and just really going through a hard time with sleep and a variety of different things. And so she did 6 weeks of that, and she met with him for 6 weeks. And now this is probably 3 months later, and he shares, he's like, she came to me because she's still been working with him. She's still been doing the work, and it's been so beautiful. And she came and said to him, she's like, this place changed me. This place changed me. And it just, when he said that, this was like in a staff meeting, we were talking, and we'll share some of our wins with the group. And I just got like, I just started crying. And it's not what I did by any means, for sure. It's just, it's it's amazing what we can do, the power of connection and the energy that we put towards. So for me, it's prayer, you could say, the power of the spoken word, the power of just more energies, intending the same thing, whatever that is, and it's her, right? It really is her. We're just doing the support and we're mirroring back from her. And he actually was the one that worked with her for months and months. And she did it. She met us. She met us halfway, instead of many people not, they're coming in, they're looking to be fixed, and nobody can fix yourself except you. The only people that we're just holding space, we're allowing God to work through us. That's great. And there has to be a meeting. There has to be a willingness on that other part. And for me, that's obviously part of the codependency, learning through that, not playing a victim, taking full accountability of your life in every single way, which I still can get caught up in at times. And now at least it's like, uh-huh, I see you, and not going down that road of victimization and victimhood, but coming back and be like, okay, breathe. Okay, God, I see it. I don't want to see it in myself. I don't like it, but just accepting, okay, instead of resisting it. Because anytime we're resisting something, what we resist persists, right? So if I'm resisting that negativity of myself, if it's trying to come in to show me, it's happening for me, not to me, even though it feels like it's happening to me. It's happening for me so that I can really look at myself and I can really look at those things that I push down, those shadow, all of that. And if I can really look at myself in that way, in truth and honesty, then it doesn't have a hold on me anymore, right? Then it's like there's no resistance anymore. It's still part of me. I have a jealous bone. I have a manipulative bone. I have all kinds of different bones in my body that are positive and negative, right? And so, me being able to just look at that in truth without judgment, which is very difficult. That's where the work is. And just sit there and be like, okay, yep. And you can then relate that back to being in religious or the Western philosophies of there's a darkness in me too. I am a sinner as well, and and I'm also in God's eyes perfect. So sinning to me is that dark side. And so it's like this dark and light that we have that when we can kind of be able to move between them and understand them and also not get caught in one or the other, right? Because if there's light, only light, that's toxic positivity. And then if there's only dark, then that's just evil darkness, right? So it's like being able to integrate both of those for me has been where it's at for me. And it's about self acceptance, like in Eastern traditions, it's nirvana. Self acceptance is nirvana. We are really literally accepting that. And then from that, we fall in love with ourselves. And how great is that? I mean, if we can fall in love with ourselves, we're in love in general, and we're in love, we're in God.
Absolutely. Full acceptance of the yin yang that we all are, right? And that's when you can find that and accept all of that and be that, then you're fully being authentic, right? Which is the full expression of I am. You're just you and all your beauty and more challenging places and, just being yourself. That's a beautiful place to be if we can find that. How did you get to that? Like those realizations? Like, were there some modalities you mentioned ayahuasca? Were there some places that you found a lot of help particularly and maybe share a few of those realizations too that came along the way?
Yeah, I think those realizations from what I'm seeing is called insight,
Mm.
right? Like you're insightful in yourself, you're seeing. And so, yes, medicine can help that. Psilocybin, ayahuasca, ketamine, peyote, all of these different psychedelics can help people gain insight. Some people naturally have insight. I feel where that comes from, for me, anyways. Maybe it came with me previously in this incarnation. I don't know. I do know this incarnation, though, living in a family with trauma, living in a family that is manipulative, that isn't comfortable speaking their truth, or doesn't allow the children to have a voice, or doesn't allow emotions to come through and us be able to honor those, we then have to watch. And we pay attention. We pay attention to what everyone's doing, and we're reading into things, right? So that becomes a sixth sense, which is really cool thing, and it comes with trauma. So it comes through a murky lens. And so I had this sixth sense, and then there's this murky lens. And so it's about like cleaning up that murky lens, the beliefs that we hold, those ideas that we hold that are not true. So I believe some people don't have that same insight. Maybe they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't come into this world with it. They didn't grow up in a family that that developed for whatever reason. So then these medicines can help give the insight. The medicines can also help um, start that process of neurogenesis. So, start that process of behavioral change. It increases brain derived neurotrophic factor, and that is the ability to create new neural pathways. So, new changes, new thoughts, new patterns, new behaviors. It also decreases the mental chatter, that internal mental chatter these psychedelics do. And when that internal mental chatter's low, then we're literally able to hear our higher self, God, coming through, which is very helpful. And then we ride that wave. So we ride the wave of the medicine while doing the work. If we just ride that wave and think we're great and not doing the work, we're going to end up at the same place. So it's really riding that wave and getting in there and doing the work. And then to me, that's creating more lasting change for people. So the psychedelics, yes. And then what's most important, I think, is being in relationship. That's what's teaching us the mirroring, the understanding. And if we can do that with self love and compassion for ourselves and for others, and we're able to see ourselves in others, that's really where the rubber meets the road, where we're really kind of like working through that. So for me, I did a lot of these different, ceremonies and explorations and stuff, and I was alone. And so I was only getting so far until I started to come into community, until I started to see myself and be like, okay, I thought it was so great because I had been on all this spiritual journey. And then once I'm in relationship and people are reflecting back to me things, it's like, oh gosh, okay, I see now, just different things where the work needed to happen. So for me, I say to people that I'm working with at the end of the day, connection's the medicine. It's connection with ourselves and connection with others. That's the true medicine. Do we need a medicine to take us there? Sometimes. Do we all the time? No. With just that feeling of connection is powerful enough.
You mentioned integration a few times, and I think it's such an important part of the work in general to make sense of it, to change the behaviors that maybe got you into the trouble in the first place, to make some shifts that allow you to maintain the good state that you maybe temporarily get from the medicine if it goes that way, or else, like you said, maybe you'll revert back to the starting point, or at least, make slight changes, or there's even a benefit on taking a quantum leap forward and then falling back and losing it in a certain way has its own kind of propeller effect, possibly, right? But I found that a lot of these ceremonies maybe don't put enough time and attention into things like integration, into understanding what's going on, how to make sense of it, how to implement change, and preparatory work too. Even aside from the actual ceremonial work itself, um, which is, a variety. Some of it's being done well, some of it's not being done as well. I find there's a lot of lack in the leading up to, aside from things like maybe like changing diet or something, but there's no real preparatory work in terms of preparing you in an understanding way of how to go into it in a way that's going to be positive and successful. And then the aftermath too, people jump back into their lives possibly too quickly or without the real integration and understanding of what happened and what to do from there if they want to, if they have some goal from it. And it's happened to me too, where I've personally left in much more troubled states than when I've entered in sometimes. And I actually have two clients right now that I'm supporting through situations like that too, where they kind of just, we're doing these things that I think are meant to be respected quite a lot, and they're kind of doing them a little carelessly, and they're left troubled from it, also. And I think it's happened quite a lot to people. I guess, like you said, there's some degree of responsibility and not playing victim in it that I have to accept too, that I got myself into the situation by maybe not trusting my intuition in the first place, or maybe there was some lesson there that I had to learn too, and possibly it was perfect and I learned the right lesson anyway. But there also maybe is a degree there where the conductors are not being totally ethical or responsible, or maybe not, possibly just being out of their zone of what they're really able to be doing. Also maybe they're playing a little out of their field and just taking things on a little bit that they're not ready for. Have you had some experiences like that personally too through working with these? Maybe talk to that a little bit and what to look for, in that, so that people can maybe have a bit more of an understanding of what they need to know in terms of when to get into things, when to not get into things, what to look for.
It seems like there's a lot of young people serving medicine at times. There can be a lot of darkness in that too, right? They can make a lot of money, serving the medicine. And there's been times where I've sat and it didn't feel right, right? Like it didn't feel like the person's heart was in the right place. It felt like more they were just there to, as an ego, because that's the end thing to do. Shamans are so cool nowadays. So they can call themselves a shaman because they serve medicine because what they got a brew or they grew mushrooms or something and now they can serve this medicine and didn't never have really gone through any training, and who knows how much work they've really done on themselves. And if you're in your 20s serving that or so, it's how much, like, there's, I look back, I'm like, I don't, I know, I'm sure some people could, and that's that's risky. That person that's serving you is so powerful in your journey, and because you are so open in that process, your crown chakra is just wide open, so your consciousness is just receiving all this information. If you are right in yourself and with God, you can hold space in a big way. It's not about what I've done. We all have this inherent ability to be healers and to help hold that space. And it's really, I don't even see myself as a healer. I allow that energy to come through, right? And to allow that energy to come through takes work. You need to be in alignment. You need to, get out of your head, out of your judgments, which can take you, and really have resolved a lot of your own issues. Do you have to be perfect? No, you don't have to be perfect. And that's it. It's accepting the imperfection and not trying to fix people. It's not about fixing anyone. It's about holding that space and allowing that person to go through that process. And maybe you just guide them or ask them a question to kind of spark their mind or something like that, um, and coaching, like you do.
And you mentioned earlier, ego, or they're like excited about being the shaman, or maybe even being the healer or something, and it's coming from that kind of place. And then you also mentioned not being the healer and kind of stepping out of the way and being like a hollow, receptacle in which God can work through. So those are kind of a polarity for me. Would you say that that might be a really good indicator for somebody to look for, and how much they're, ego driven in a certain kind of self-fulfilling way versus more genuinely, desiring to help or something? That must be a pretty core part of it, right?
I think so. I think there's definitely an inner felt knowing if you really are paying attention to yourself. Like you said, you can choose people and you're like, oh, yes, and you knew better, but you did it anyway, right? So it's honoring that part of you that is kind of like, not so sure about this, but you want to do it so bad anyway. Or it's, for some reason, there's another person going and you're going to go because you've got to be with them or whatever that is. So it's, or, so many different stories about that you can go into. So it's really about honoring that feeling inside of you because we all have the inherent ability to know truth. It's just whether we're open to receive that truth or not.
That's where I got into all the trouble, was just actually having all the knowing that I need and just still, oh, but it's going to be good because of this thing, you know? And that's where it always goes wrong.
I just got chills when you said that because it's like if we could just stay in that, even if we've had traumas, even if we've had all this, if we're able to stay true to that, that's going to guide us regardless. You know what I mean? So, but it does get clouded, and sometimes we need the language around things to uncloud ourselves. But that connection, if we could keep that connection, which is hard to do, right? It's like we are Snatam Kaur has the song, um, about her soul coming and going. Rumi talks about the dance. We're always dancing. We're always like, even Jason Mraz, we remember, we forget, we remember, we forget, we remember, we forget. It's that thing when we're remembering, we are in that truth, and then we forget. And because we get pulled out of it for one way or another, and our ego does. And an ego doesn't need to be like, I'm this big, great person. It's just ego's edging God out, whatever that is. It can be like literally a thought that we're not good enough, a thought that we're whatever, and then we attach to that, and then there we are, that we're not in that truth anymore.
And for you, you mentioned ketamine specifically. And I don't know if you're serving anything but ketamine, but I've never actually tried ketamine. Um, what does that look like? A ceremony with ketamine? What does it look like? And what do people get out of that? If you could speak to that a little bit, because I actually don't know myself.
I think partly the reason I was drawn to ketamine is because legally it can be served in this country, right? There are certain places in the country where psychedelics are decriminalized and many parts that are not, right? And so I have worked with psilocybin in places that were decriminalized. And when I first went out of nursing into nurse practitioner school, I remember hearing that I was going for credibility, and I didn't understand what that meant. And then this allows me to be able to, use this medicine in this way. So it was all part of the path for me with God. Um, Ketamine is similar to the other psychedelics and then very different. Like I said, it does increase brain derived neurotrophic factor, it does decrease that internal mental chatter, so similar to other psychedelics. It works a little differently on the brain. It works on the glutamate receptors instead of the serotonergic receptors. So it does act a little differently. And what I notice is it seems like in the traditional psychedelics, afterwards, I can get very high. Ketamine seems to bring people back into their bodies very presently. So it's a little different in that way. So it works well with other medicines. It plays well with most other medicines. When we're doing this psychotherapy related to ketamine, these experiences, they we have a lot of clientele that are coming in that are on SSRIs, so some form of antidepressant, serotonergic things, and with ayahuasca, that's a no-no, right? Because there is a risk of serotonin syndrome. I know with psilocybin that's a little different. I just read a study on it. You can actually be on a SSRI and use psilocybin, and there's not an interaction there. I still would be a little bit careful just in case you did. You just have to pay attention to those signs and symptoms. With ketamine, it works so well in this mental space, especially because we see clients on variety of different medications that definitely you couldn't sit with ayahuasca with, and maybe not psilocybin with other ones. We have a variety of people coming in with depression and anxiety and bipolar and variety of different things. So ketamine is helpful in that way because it's more versatile. And you're in the medicine, in the experience, anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and 15-ish. So these other traditional ones, it's 4 hours, 6 hours, you're in the medicine. So this is obviously a little bit more time efficient for people. And then again, it's legal. Um, so yeah, I think those are the kind of differences. The other ones are wonderful. I love plant medicines, and then this just gives me the ability, and us, all the people that I work with, the ability to touch a greater population than we could if it didn't exist.
Good to know. And you mentioned how it has kind of like an opposite effect of like more grounding feeling. There's a lot of people that I know, with traumas, you kind of get disconnected in a certain way, and your soul kind of doesn't fully inhabit your body. It can happen that way, at least, where it's kind of like pushed out a little bit, or to some degree pushed out, and they have a trouble of actually like welcoming their full soul back into their body and grounding from there. So it's like they might have a lot of channeling abilities or even heart abilities up top or something, but when it comes down to inhabiting their solar plexus, their sacral, their root, and their legs, and fully just embodying themselves in the physical, there's some level of disconnection there. So is it good for that kind of thing?
It is. It's still a process, right? So that's it. I think, AO, if I had to sum it down, what wellness is, it's about being in your parasympathetic nervous system. As we're in our parasympathetic nervous system, we are in that space to be able to heal, and our bodies will heal. These days, with stress, with EMF, with all kinds of different things, traumas and variety of distractions, right? The busyness of life, all of that, we all get affected by that. And then we're triggered and we're out of that parasympathetic. And many of us are in this sympathetic dominant state. And when we're in that state, we're unable to heal, or because we're in that action mode, we need to be in a rest and digest state for our bodies to really heal. So the the ketamine helps in that way, I believe, getting the body a little bit more in that space. And it's interesting because I've had mold toxicity and work with people with neurocognitive immune syndromes, which are these like mold and Lyme disease and different things like that, and long COVID even, a variety of these different states that were being triggered again and again. And so many people have medical trauma now because of COVID, or because of the medical system of where it's at, and have gone to so many different doctors to help them. And nothing against the doctors. It's just we're still learning, and they're never going to find that space if they're not in their parasympathetic state. And I mean, ultimately, I believe we all have the ability to heal ourselves. And it's just getting ourselves back into that balanced state so that we can heal. So ketamine does help bring you back into the body and help you get there. And that's what I see most, is people just need to feel safe in their bodies again. And many people, including myself for so long, just did not feel safe. And sometimes, just want to mention, I went through, as my mom, when I said that I just really had a difficult time as a young kid, and then she went on medicines, I had a very much a judgment against medication, big judgment against antidepressants or any of these medicines. And there is a big population out there that will feed that judgment, oh, if we're on one of those medicines, we're not healed. That's not entirely true. It's not, I mean, we may eventually, but there are genetics, there's deficiencies, there's so many things that maybe, just maybe, a thought is that we're meant here to accept that and work with it. And maybe part of that is taking a medication at times. I went so long with judging myself and not taking it. When I finally went on something to help me, and an antidepressant to help me, literally I could hear God again. Literally, I felt more safe in my body. Yes, can I still move forward and maybe tweak things and do things? And who knows, maybe eventually I wouldn't be on one in 5, 10 years. And I'm not running with that. I'm not resisting that. I'm accepting that, hey, this is where I'm at right now. This is where God wants me to be, because my quality of life is better. And I'm just a better person in general because everything is working properly. So we're all in a work in progress, and how that looks for ourselves. And I think that's really important because there's such a stigma against mental health and medications, and people don't want to be on medications. And it's just, it's okay. If everything has God in it, so do these medicines, as long as they're appropriately used and not overused and not over medicated, and people are doing their work and they're doing all this stuff. And if you need something to help you, then take it.
I believe that. I think there's a place for everything, right? And that's where it kind of gets a little funky for me is, the way I see the Western system is maybe these things have a place, but maybe they're not used in that best place a lot of the time. So I'm curious to hear your words on that too. Like, antidepressants are rampant today, and I think they're kind of given as a solution instead of people needing to do any work, Here is the solution and just take this forever and don't worry about the work kind of mentality, a little bit at least, more than I'd like. And yeah, I think there's a place for them. I'm curious to hear what your thought is there, what is the rightful place for things like that in their journey, in their coping, and then in their, let's say, eventual shining.
I think that they need to be used responsibly.
Mhm.
It's not just a band-aid. It is a tool, just like anything. All things can be a tool or a weapon, a cure or a poison, depending on how we're looking at it, right? And so I think that in the right way, it can be used to enhance people's lives and help them move through hard times while they're working on other things. And what comes to mind too is the Vedic traditions, Ayurveda, about the gut health. Gut health is extremely important. If you are barely hanging on by a thread because your neurotransmitters are so messed up, you can't even sit still for 1 second, how are you going to be able to fix your gut? How are you going to be able to meditate? How are you going to be able to read one page out of a book? There are times where it's really important and needed. So I think it's just with discretion and also with the idea of talking with the person and really helping them see that, okay, yes, this can help you. And if you don't do anything about it, you're going to need more. You're going to need a different one. You're going to need another one. You're going to need all these things where let's work with your body's chemistry. Let's work with your psyche. Let's work with everything and ultimately get to that place. And if you still need one, fine. You still may need those tools and doing the work and you're feeling like your quality of life is better, your connection to people are better, your life is working for you and not against you. Those are the signs. If you're still, I do see many people on many different medications and their life's still not working for them because they or the practitioner or both just used it as a band-aid. Here you go, just take this and it'll all go away. No, you can take that so you can feel better and then, move forward in your life, start doing that work and get momentum going. And then maybe you'll be able to come off it, maybe you won't. Still, though, you have a better quality of life and you're moving forward and you're feeling connection again. And to me, that's the most important thing.
It's one form of, like you said, a band-aid or like a coping mechanism for a time, which is fair, completely fair. And there's many forms of that, and it's a tough time right now. The numbers on all these things are fairly high. Not just on that, but in other forms, marijuana or alcohol or anything like that that are kind of allowing people today to get through to another time. And what you think, the way through is.
I will say a couple of things there that you mentioned. So you did mention marijuana, cannabis. And again, cannabis can be a tool or a hindrance. And I do certify people for cannabis for cards. And I do give them a handout. And part of that is smoking it. Smoking it has actually causes neuroinflammation. And I used cannabis for a long time for sleep because I wasn't sleeping and it was pretty intense. And I realized that it was making me worse because it was the inflammation that was happening in my body from the smoke in general and was causing the neuroinflammation and causing my neurotransmitters to be affected and all of that. So, cannabis can still be a tool. I think eaten, not smoking, because smoking can make things worse. Some people would maybe do okay with it. It just depends on how much and everything. But I would say for the most part, smoking's not the best way to intake cannabis. And then being very careful. It is a slippery slope. You can become dependent on it. We can become dependent on anything. So is it working for you? Are you moving forward in your life? Are you feeling valued? Are you feeling value and connections more? Are you feeling connected to God more? I think it's more about those questions than I'm not supposed to take anything. I mean, it's also genetics. Genetics plays a huge role. And I've learned for me myself, there's a condition, it's a COMT genetic mutation, where your body is unable to break down the amines like dopamine and things like that. So like if you haven't eaten in a little bit and your cortisol rises and your epinephrine and all that stuff, your body's unable to break that down. You just become more amped and more amped and more amped. Like literally, if I drink a cup of coffee at 8 in the morning, I won't be able to sleep all night. And that's just, and I turned that gene on. I know when I turned it on. And there's a thing called epigenetics where we turn our genes on and off. I believe that we turn our genes on through a lot of various things. Trauma can be a big one. If we're repeating ancestral patterns that are not good for us, oftentimes we can turn on those genes. The thing is, it's really difficult to turn them back off. It takes a lot of work. And if you've turned them on, maybe then again, you need some sort of medicine and then you can kind of get yourself straight and then do the work so that maybe you can get off those or, make different choices that are more evolutionary aligned and sustainable for yourself.
Back to that question, let's say, of Western and the Eastern philosophies and the different medicines you're taking from the Western philosophies, from the Eastern, from spirituality and religion. Are they harmoniously fitting together?
They are. And I'm not a Bible scholar, and I have been studying the Bible, and that's my intention for this year. What I see is they are all saying the same thing if you're looking for the truth. We've come from this very patriarchal society, and then this whole new age yogic thing, I believe, is part of the feminine rising. The feminine was within us, the masculine is within us. The masculine has been dominating, which is about action and go 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 and being on that hamster wheel and achieve achieve achieve. And then this feminine side, I believe why Eastern philosophies are coming in is to be able to receive. That masculine doesn't receive. I'm going to be really weird here, but the feminine receives and the masculine gives. So that's the difference. And we have it within all of us. So the masculine acts, the feminine receives. We were missing that for so many years. So the yogic tradition about meditation is where you receive. Prayer is when you're acting and so I believe it's both. It's both and it's not either or. So really, and then now as I'm reading the Bible, it's like, I can read it with different eyes than I did when I was younger, where it was more interpreted for me, where there was conditioning involved. Now it's a lot deeper meaning for me. And so there's so much truth in all of it. It's really, I think, much of it is truth. It's just how it's interpreted. For me, for example, and this is just something that I came up with, and I believe it true as true. They say Jesus walked on water. Well, in other philosophies, water is emotion. What he did was he mastered his emotion. That's walking on water to me, right? So we all have that ability to be like Jesus, let's say in the Western religions, we all are parts, we all are. And so how do we do that? And so he's teaching us how to do this through these teachings. And so then the other side teaches us more of the feminine of being able to receive. And then yoga is amazing as far as like we hold different emotions in our bodies and stuff like that, and being able to work through those and and be able to meditate and talk to our bodies, and our bodies teach us. If we're listening, our body will tell us what we're holding on to. It'll tell us, it'll show us a memory. It'll have a word for us if we're really paying attention there. So I think that that's an important part, because once we move through those, then we have moksha, which is emotional freedom in the Vedic traditions, which again in the Western is walking on water. We've mastered our emotions. When we can master our emotions, we are more of a clear conduit, a clear vessel to serve in that way.
I was thinking of something that happened to me in the last week or so with my therapist in that your body will speak to you. And, recently I've been feeling my solar plexus more than usual in, a contracted and fearful state, let's say, some anxiety in there and stuff like that. So he helped me really tune into that. So I tuned into it and I was seeing what it was about, and it was directly related to doing these podcasts because I'm overcoming a fear of, being on camera, shining, and all that stuff right now. So through just being guided into letting my body speak to me for 1 minute, it told me exactly what was going on, right? And then from there, the truth shall set you free and you can figure out what you need to do from there. But as long as it's unconscious, you're not getting anywhere, right? That's always the first step. So I love what you're saying there. Your body always speaks to you if you want to listen.
Yeah, it's the best tool we have, right? It's just that it's how you treat it. It's not going to be a great tool if you're putting, low level gasoline in there. You got to put, primo gasoline for it to run fully on all however many cylinders. That's where the yogic comes in and helps us in that way, because I don't know about you. For me, growing up and being in the Western religions and being healthy as a teenager and watching these people that were not healthy. And the Bible, I mean, it says, that your body's your vessel to treat it well. And but that gets overlooked a lot in the Western religion. So it's like, okay, this doesn't quite resonate. And then, there's a lot of hypocrisy and things like that. And I think that's what's pushed people away. Like, okay, that's not the way that it needs to be. And though there are people that are on the Western side that have this beautiful faith and beautiful, like, just way of being. So I think it just, yeah, it depends, but I think for the majority of people, we needed both. We need to have whatever that looks like. But regardless, I think all of us need both the masculine and feminine within us. And then for me, that's just the symbolism that I use for that.
It resonates with me too, the yin and the yang, or you even see in Indian mythology and stuff, you see them separated down the middle. You have a masculine side and a feminine side. They're both all integrated as one. That's kind of a symbology for all of us, right? How about yourself? Taking care of yourself at this point in your life. How are you taking care of yourself so you can serve people too?
I'll be really honest, feeling like I'm home in my body again, you know? And that has been, again, I did allow myself to start taking a medication. And also, so that's grace, right? Just allowing myself the grace to do that. It was so hard, like very masculine dominating, and like, no, I'm not going to do this. And it's the feminine's trying to talk, like, okay, are you sure? So part of that has been that, which has allowed me to develop a practice because before that, like I said, sometimes I was hanging on by a thread. And I'm a very disciplined person. That's just how I've been since a kid. I would instill just different things in myself. Sports and academics were always very important, and I was always very disciplined. So to lose that and not be able to have a practice, I'm just like, what is going on with me? What is this? So to help that, and which has enabled me to have a practice, and honestly, it's spending time in nature because then I'm able to receive information through God, through nature, and then reading the scriptures has been a game changer for me, really. And literally, I'm seeing it now with when I work with clients. I'm hearing God come through a lot easier. And I'll be saying things to them, and they're like, thank you for saying that. I was just thinking that, or that's what's been coming up for me, or all these coincidences that we hear. And it's not me. It's just finally my brain's calm enough, and I'm allowing that I am the vessel now where God can come through and help serve and help people hear what they need to hear in that time so that they're able to move forward. It's a recognition, it's an acceptance of that person. Like, it's okay. You're not broken. Many people come to this work thinking they're broken. You're not broken. You're just remembering you're remembering back, you're remembering yourself, you're remembering all the parts of yourself that you've lost through different things, through trauma at 2 or 6 or 14 or whatever. Those are coming back to you. So now you're whole again.
I've never heard that with remember. That's a good one. I love wordplay like that, but that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, that I actually, I'll be very honest, stole from a friend of mine, Henry, who he and I both shared that love of words and being able to have that wordplay. So I give him credit for that.
That's awesome. I mean, we're all stealing everything anyway. I didn't come up with probably anything, you know. It's just it's in me and I don't know where it came from and it's now I'm a vessel for it. You know, I think with your stories there, I'm thinking of the word synchronicity, and I think that's a really good marker for being in a good place when you're saying things and they're like, yeah, that's just what I was thinking, and you're kind of resonating in a certain way with the life around you, that you're having synchronistic events and stuff like that. I think that's a beautiful place to be and a good marker for being on track.
I think I agree. I mean, synchronicity to me is showing us that God's all around us, and that's God moving, if it's happening and through all of this and it's feeling good, it's like, okay, you can't deny that.
And about yourself right now in life, like what's exciting you personally and professionally right now?
Okay, so let's see. I'm really loving the work that I'm doing with people with ketamine. It's interesting as I hold space for people, they help me heal. I see myself through them. So I'm then reflecting and I'm like, okay, I learn from them all the time when they come out and they're sharing their stories and everything. It's like, wow, I needed to hear that too. I got that out whenever I'm holding space for somebody. It's a mutual exchange. There's always something there for both of us. So I love that. I'm also starting to do more of the integrative health by offering the nutrient testings and stuff so we can see where people are deficient in genetics, just to help people kind of along that route so they can get that physicality, so then they are able to be more connected and hear God or whatever their intentions are in that way. And then what's really kind of coming up for me right now is I just joined a group. About a month ago, I went to this um, Christian based um, seminar on building money for the kingdom. And the idea is that if we're financially free, then we're able to be free to serve in the way that God wants us to serve. If we're just on the hamster wheel, working, 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 we're not shining. We're not serving in that way. We're not sharing our gifts. And so this is what I loved about this organization. It's like, no, you're here. It's not about the money either. It's about building that so that you have the time to be able to serve, because that speaks to my heart. Do missionary work in that way of just helping people just get better and, you know, um, lift their vibrations in whichever way. And then ultimately, I'd love to be able to do more motivational speaking and inspirational speaking. And oftentimes that takes money, right, to get there. And I came from nothing. I got my lunch ticket from a government program that got stamped. I came from that background. So it's a mind stretch for me. And it's something that I've always known that I've wanted and always known that God's speaking to me. And I really believe that we're being called to kind of do that, to show people, hey, there's another way. We don't have to be part of the herd mentality. We can actually think for ourselves, allow that voice to come through, allow that energy to come through, to move us, to trust in the process, trust that little voice in back of our head that says, we are meant here for something really important, because we all are. And to be able to trust that and honor that and move through that, then it's like the spokes of a wheel, of a bicycle wheel. When all of them are tuned properly, the wheel just moves really smoothly. So we're all finding our place in this universe, on this planet Earth, to do what we're meant to do here. And how cool is that if we all got to that place?
Think for the work that you're doing, and it's wonderful. I believe in that, handling the physical aspects of being safe and free to be able to, expand from and do some good work. think a lot more of the money in the world should be in good people's hands, you know? Did I miss anything, that's going on? Is there a question that you wish I asked you today?
There is something that's coming to mind. As I've gone through this process, I have felt like I've let people go. Like there's this idea in this new age spiritual world, if that people are toxic and you got to shut them out of your life and all of these things. And it's appropriate at times. There are boundaries that need to take place with the idea that as long as we're looking at ourselves too, because if we're seeing toxicity, then where is that? Is that out there or is that within us? You know, and really looking at that and giving people grace, ourselves grace to be able to forgive with also boundaries, not being martyrs either, you know? And that's an art. That is something that is hard earned and always takes awareness of being in the moment, of being present. We're not going to be able to be present if we have drugs or alcohol on board all the time, or other things too, if we're allowing other people to infiltrate our thoughts. So being present. And I guess, yeah, that's just what I'll say. Like everyone says, being present is a present. It is literally when you offer me your presence, it's so valuable because you are just literally God in drag in a way, right? And so, and then we connect and then we're able to create and create. And I believe that God wants to express through each and every one of us in our own unique way.